social media has destroyed our ability to remain. Big moments have a lot of sucky ones. It's not spiritual warfare. Rejection's inevitable, but it have purpose. I think sometimes we make up terms to justify us walking away, like the grace has lifted. I don't even know what that means.
Brian, so glad that you're here on the podcast. So our show's called How Change Happens. And we just want to tell stories that give people permission to take action, to take risks for what God's calling them to do, right? And so I know a lot of people are going to be interested in this episode because of the crazy things that you've seen and pioneered basically in the high school, the mission field of high schools. That's, one of the, obviously the main things that the Send calls people to. But just, I guess before we get in, I would love to hear, like, what's the update on Jesus Clubs? What are you seeing around the nation? I mean, I'm seeing crazy headlines about Gen Z going back to church, like buying Bibles. And so I'm just wondering, like, what are you seeing in the high schools?
Well, I'll say this. It took us 10 years to get into over 100 schools. And that was our first decade. And then I think, so that was 2009 to 2019. Then obviously we all know 2020 hits and my world shuts down. Everything I built in a matter of a few days, because I was living in Los Angeles, and we jumped online as everybody else did. And we seen a huge digital influx. We seen the Jesus Clubs go from 115 campuses in the US to now millions of views. I think we're getting close to 5 to 8 million views a month. Our hashtag hit almost 500 million in the span of about a year and a half, 2 years. And we were putting out 4,500 videos a month with a team of 25. That was about 9 to 10 videos a day per person. Okay. So we flooded the airways. Yeah, we were bored, as you can tell. So we never knew, though, what would come from that. While in that space, we did two things. We did a text number. So we had a big heart for how do we connect beyond, the platform. So we would do things like, hey, text the word saved if you want to get saved. Text the word fasting. We're going to do a fast. In a span of 2 years, we had 18,000 students text into this number. Well, then we said the text number only works for the United States. What do? So we built an app on a shoestring budget, told our guys, we have no money, let's make an app. We built an app. We didn't think hardly anyone would download it. We had over 20,000 downloads on this app, which has now gotten us into, we're in 48 states and 78 countries now. And what I mean by that is not just people that have followed us on a page. Those are students that have been trained. So they go from so here's the process. They watch a video on his social media that leads them to download an app. From the app, they register on a Zoom. So talk about a lot of steps here. From the Zoom, they get on the Zoom and they're trained for over an hour, maybe hour and a half. And then we ship them a launch kit. So when I say we're in 78 countries, that's students from 78 countries that have gone through that process. Wow. So there would be, I don't do those trainings online. Our team does those, but they tell me stories where there'd be a kid, it's 3 a.m. in the dark. They got in Korea, they're on getting trained. We've trained kids all throughout even in the Middle East, 1040 window.
No way.
We've shipped launch kits from Beverly Hills to the slums of India. We could show you our tracking. Very expensive. We didn't think we'd be shipping out there. We didn't think through that one. But so I say that to say Jesus Clubs has grown, and I would say in my opinion, 80 to 85% of those students have no clue who I am or who even necessarily that we're based in Dallas. The Jesus Clubs has really taken on its own form. I was talking to my buddy the other day, and he was like, we need you more in Jesus Clubs. I was like, I don't really think you do. I said, if I died tomorrow, would you keep going to schools? He said, yes. I said, well, there you go. Like it's really, we just give the foundation pieces of what worked, and it
Yeah.
has taken on its own form. I know many churches that have 8 to 10 Jesus clubs now. It's insane. So we're now in the process of touring those clubs. That's kind of the season we're in. Um, yeah, and then we're in the process of figuring out how to keep pouring into people that are kind of within that Jesus club vein.
Questions naturally arise when you study your Bible. Logos is a place where you can get those questions answered. Imagine being able to ask C.S. Lewis to explain his thoughts about salvation. With Logos and their new study assistant, you can use the power of AI to mine the depths of the Bible and the most trusted theologians all in one place. If you sign up right now, you get a free 60-day trial and you can see how it impacts your Bible study. Go to logos.com/thesend and sign up now. I logged in and I asked Logos to help me understand how the disciples responded after Jesus gave them the Great Commission. And it gave me this really interesting summary with Bible verses and hyperlinks to books in the Logos library that I could dive into for more. If you're passionate about studying the Bible and if you want to learn from history's greatest theologians and get your personal questions answered, then this is definitely for you. The Bible, it's an ancient book, and you want to know that you're reading it well. So get the historical context, search passages and themes, and satisfy that longing that you have to know the Bible more. 6 million people are using Logos, and it's time for you to try it too. Go to logos.com/thesend, and you'll get that 60-day trial for free. Yeah. What are the main hurdles, I guess? Somebody that wants to start one, what are the most common like roadblocks or things that are stopping them that you're coaching them? You're like, hey, that's actually not a big deal. You can break through that. And yeah, what are the
Yeah,
things?
I think people have a hard time hearing no. For me,
Sure.
no is never a no. It's always there has to be a way in. But I was kind of raised like that. Like my mom, when I was 15, she goes, "You're gonna go get a job because you need to pay bills." So I was like, "I don't know how to get a job." She says, "You're gonna fill out 50 applications and you're gonna call every place every day, asking them where your application is in the process. And even if they say we're still processing, you're gonna call the next day until you get a job." So my mom instilled in me this thing of like, I will get in eventually. So how can we make it work? So I mean, I have a story that I've shared this before. I was trying to get into a school in Crenshaw in Los Angeles. I had zero connections. There was no Bible club. We didn't even know anybody. So I showed up the first day, high security. They didn't even let me pass the security gate. Said, okay, I'll be back next week. They went back the next week. Same thing, but I became a little bit more friendly with the security guard. The
Yeah.
next week, now we're joking, talking, laughing. Hey man, he goes, I still can't let you in, but it's good talking with you. I said, okay. So I come back the fourth week and I'm standing in there and he goes, you know what? He goes, why don't you just head into the office and just see if you can meet the principal? I said, okay. So I walk into the office. I'm not making this up. I have witnesses. As I open up the office door, a squirrel runs into the office from the outside and all the admin ladies are screaming. So I go, I don't know why. It was like, everybody get out, get out. I'll handle this. So I was with a couple people and we like trapped this squirrel. I was going to, kill it, but I was like, nah, PETA's would probably get on my case. So we trapped this squirrel. We ended up getting it out. But the whole time, the admin ladies and the principal are watching me in this window as we get the squirrel out. And the principal comes up to me, goes, that was some good work. Who are you with? And I go, sir, I've just been trying to meet someone here. I'm a Christian. I'm part of the Jesus Clubs. He goes, come with me. He walks me over to a coach who's a Christian, and we launch a club in that school with a church. 200 kids come to the first meeting.
No
So
way, bro.
that's a
That is
that's one.
great.
I've only happened one time, but that's an exaggerated one-time story. But I do say that the point of that is I just have the resilience is the part that stops most people. That do they actually want it bad enough? Because I think it's one thing to say, "Oh, I want to reach a school." Well, then you're embracing rejection. You're embracing, hardships. You're embracing being misunderstood. You're embracing atheists on the campus, teachers that hate you, principals that don't like you. It all kind of comes with that.
Yeah. Gosh, that is so important because there's so many people at those send events. God really speaks to them, like something hits them. They're like, man, I have been marked. But then they then you're kind of, what do you do next? And I think a lot of people, they hit that resistance, and it's like, man, did God really say this? Is it supposed to be this hard? And there's so much confusion right there. So I actually am really glad you shared that, because I've been talking to different people about how they launch things, but that's a very unique insight that nobody's
You know,
shared
it's
yet.
funny. So we're both from the charismatic stream, and I think sometimes we make up terms to justify us walking away. Like I've heard the grace has lifted. I don't even know what that means. Or in the grace always lift. I say grace lifts means it's now inconvenient and uncomfortable. And I just don't want to do it anymore, which I respect that more than someone saying the grace is lifted. The other one I hear is I just don't have a peace. And to me, if peace is your main indicator of obedience, then you are screwed, because Jesus is pinnacle of obedience was the garden, and zero, I can't find a verse that said, and he was at peace in his
Oh my
heart.
gosh, this is good.
I mean, the guy was sweating blood. He's like, can I get out of this? Like, I don't want to do this. And I love what I've heard this pastor say. His friends were sleeping and his father was silent, but his father was silent because he already had given instructions of what he needed to do. And sometimes we take silence as, oh, God's not in it no more. No, his silence sometimes is the loudest scream of you're in my will, you know?
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
That's just what I
So,
feel like in high school. That's just one of the mentalities I've had.
yeah, probably just par for the course. Do you have some stories where you kind of hit a season like that, or a circumstance where you're just like, man, everything seems against it, but you just kept going, and then there was a breakthrough moment?
I think Roosevelt. Yeah, everyone knows that story of Roosevelt.
No,
But
I think there's gonna be a lot of people listening to this that have never heard it before, so you should go into
I
it.
always tell the same old stories. There was a gymnasium filled with kids, and it happened. I started a meeting off with 5 kids, and in 3 weeks there was 450 for 4 years. And then in that 4 years, man, we had mandatory school assemblies they let us do. The largest Bible club we had was almost 900 one week. We seen, I mean, the favor we had was crazy, but the year leading up to that, I had moved to LA and was trying to get into this school called Roosevelt for maybe 6, 7 months. And I was just couldn't find anyone I knew. I went there, couldn't get any connections in. I was also at that time, honestly, really going through a depression because I had left everything in Northern California. I'm living in LA. I'm living in some back house in the ghetto. There's like FBI raids every week in that neighborhood. And I'm broke. I'm not making this up. I was making $150 a month, living rent free at this house, starving. My grandma was sending me food bank food. It's one thing to go to the food bank yourself, it's another thing when you're mailed food bank food. Imagine by the time it gets to my house, nasty spinach and hard rice. And it was nothing glamorous about my life. And so I ended up going to preach at this little church. I know this sounds like a movie, but I got witnesses for this too. It was underneath a liquor store. It's LA for you. So it was like a basement Hispanic church. As I'm preaching, I literally have this thought as I'm talking to the congregation, what am I doing here? Like, this is such an odd space for me to be. So I get done preaching and I tell my buddy, I'm going to go sit in the car. You pack up and let's leave after. As I'm in the car, I get a knock on my window from this guy from the church. He's all tatted up and he goes, hey, I heard you mention Roosevelt tonight. He goes, I'm a drug and alcohol counselor at that school. And I think there's an existing Bible club. I'm going to get the kid's number and I'll give it to you in a few days. So I give him my number and I'm thinking, okay, I've been trying for months. A couple days later, I get a phone number of this kid named Uriel. So I call him and he answers and I go, hey, I know this guy got your number. I said, I'm not crazy. Could you give me 5 minutes? So I begin to tell him all, I feel God's called me to your school. I love to work with you. And he goes, I have to work with you. And I said, really, why? And he goes, have you ever heard of a man named Nets Gomez? Now, Nets Gomez was my senior pastor at that time. And I said, that's my pastor. And he goes, well, 6 months ago, my mom was listening to his radio program. And there was a man on his program named Brian Barcelona. He goes, I've been trying to get a hold of Brian Barcelona for 6 months. We get into his school, 5 kids, 3 weeks later, 450. And I say that because a lot of times we feel frustrated of us trying to get into something, not knowing God is also working behind those scenes. And I just feel like so many people quit, man, on the cusp. And that's the thing that sucks about breakthrough. You just don't know when it comes. You don't know if it
Yeah.
would, you don't know if it would have come a day or a year or a week. But I've just seen too many stories where, I just kind of stuck it out. And not because I was great or had great theology. I think I was just, I had nothing else to do. I'm like, I feel like I have to do this.
I mean, what drove you? I guess I have some paradigm in my head that, this is kind of the formula for how change happens. You hear God, he speaks to you some promise, and then, there's some simple steps of obedience. And then there's usually like a season where it's small and you're just faithfully going through it, and it nothing is living up to the promise that God gave you. But then all of a sudden one day in that place of faithfulness, God's spirit drops and then everything changes. You look at the upper room, the book of Acts, that you see patterns of that. And it feels like if we could latch on to that, like, I know I heard God, I'm taking that risk, I'm taking
Yep.
the simple obedience, that I'm just
Yep.
waiting and making space for God's spirit to
Yep.
show up. So I guess what kind of drove you? Like, what was the initial story or promise that God gave you about high schools?
I think what drove me is I heard somebody say this once. They said God does not do things in minutes, seconds, minutes, days, weeks. He does things in years and in decades. And I never forgot that. So I think for me, it wasn't a matter of like, oh, this isn't working. Also, like, I remember my life before I was a Christian. Man, I was so tormented with like so many things that I think my early days, I was just so grateful to be saved. I remember this vivid memory when I was working with my first church. I was just a part of the youth group. And I remember I hated going home because my parents, my mom and stepdad weren't Christians. My stepdad was verbally abusive and would chase me out the house. Big old dude on steroids. So I just hated being home. Get cussed at, yelled at. So I was always at church when I got saved. But I remember this vivid memory that I was taking out the trash one time. They were like, Brian, can you take it? And it was a big church. Like, can you take out all the trashes in the rooms? I'm like, sure. And I remember crying when I was taking out the trash because I was like, God, this is so much better to take out this trash than to be in that house. Like, I'd rather take out this trash in this church every day. And for me, it was just always that gratitude of like, I just get to do this, which that's where I've had a hard time, even in today's culture, understanding of like, could I have said I was used? And sure, I guess anyone can say that. But for me, I was like, I didn't feel used. I washed cars and did things, maybe that were a little bit above the ministry line, but I didn't care. I just was grateful. And I think that's the piece that a lot of people, I'm not saying I've never fought this, but we get jaded in ministry. We get jaded in these certain things that are difficult for us to navigate and go through. It happens. And so I think that has been what's kept me over the years, whether we've had no money, decent money, our event, man, I've done events where we've had thousands, and I've done events where like no one came, I have stories for everything on those things.
And so you're saying kind of that having that right perspective and gratitude
Mm-hmm.
was the thing that enabled you to sustain all the hard work and
Yes.
the no's and the rejection. But what was the thing that God spoke to you? Like, did he give you some promise over, hey, this is what I want to do in high schools? Like, what was the driving vision behind all the hard work and the sitting in traffic, going to different high schools, and yeah, what was the thing inside of you that said, I want see this?
I think for me, I knew that I knew that the Lord was going to save high schools. I met this guy. I don't share this story often. So I heard the Lord in 2009. He spoke to me and said, I'm going to save high schools in America, and I want to work with your life to do it. None of that made me feel pompous. All of that made me feel like, man, you are making a really big mistake. So, because I feel like what my life has always been is I know I have a calling, I know I have an anointing, but I'm trapped in this body that feels so incapable of doing any of these things that God has asked. So I feel trapped in my humanity. I've never felt like, oh man, I'm the man of God. For me, it's been the opposite of like, I don't know if I could do this. But I remember when he spoke to me this 2009, he said I would save high schools. He said, high schools in California, then it'd be the country, whatever. So I remember it was years later, maybe a couple years later, that I'm at a conference and this guy comes up to me after I got done sharing my testimony. And he says to me, hey, I want to tell you, he's in tears. And he said, the Lord spoke to me in 2009 that he would save high schools in Elk Grove. That was where I was from, same exact word. And I said, hey, me too. He goes, the Lord said he would save California schools and he'd move across the country. And I was like, dude, that's the same word I got. And he goes, but I told the Lord no. And I never
Oh,
forgot that because I realized that I was not God's divine choice. If you look at my life, like, man, I could write a book on my mistakes and deficiencies and areas that I feel like I didn't have I got saved, but I came from a very broken family, domestic violence. I
yeah.
came from divorce. And so I just think God took all those things and it always made me be able to relate to almost anybody. Hey, I know what it's like to go through a divorce, or your parents get divorced. Hey, I know what it's like to be hit. Hey, I know what it's like to feel abandoned. Even my ethnicity, I felt like I always got along with white people. I got along with black people. I got along with Asian. I just feel like I just connected with everybody. People were just people to me. But that original word is what held me
Mm.
of knowing this would this would eventually happen.
Yeah. Well, tell me then, okay, you had God speak to you about that, high schools, California nations. And how old did you say you were?
I was 18.
Okay, perfect. So, I mean, I'm just thinking there's so many people at the send, God is speaking to them, and they're in that same place. They're like, I'm young, I don't know what to do. Like what was the like very first step of obedience, or how did you even make sense of finding a direction and knowing what to do? Like how did you flesh out that promise that God gave?
I'll go short on this and then I'll go on what I wouldn't do again.
Yes,
Um,
please. Okay.
I just, for me, the first step, I just didn't know where to start. So I just went to my old high school and where I graduated from. And I was like, I'll just start there. So I had to like reconcile with like people, because back when I was in high school, I was flipping off security guards and doing stupid stuff. So I went in, reconciled, and I did get saved my senior year, but I was real tucked away at that time. I went back in, I started working with the teacher. I went a couple days a week and I just preached twice a week. And no one knew it wasn't like public of like, this was before really social media was really, really big. So I'd go in every week and I wasn't posting about stuff. I would preach, a few kids would come. And honestly, most of my early sermons were regurgitated messages I heard on YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know how to preach, so I preached my style was whoever I watched that week.
Yeah.
Um, but I began to learn. I began to learn how to communicate to that demographic of people. I began to learn what they valued. I began to learn what was their pain points. How do we bring the Lord in? I think if I going back, what I would have done different was I feel like I wish I would have slowed down. I was so ambitious to see God move that I feel like there's a lot of my heart pieces that I just kind of skipped over. And I feel like I was so driven to like see revival that I also didn't really enjoy what was happening. I look back at those Roosevelt years and my one regret is I didn't enjoy anything because I was
No
always
way.
like, well, that was good. What about the next big thing? Or, we had 400 kids, but last week we had 450. Like, it's like I just didn't know how to enjoy that.
Yeah.
Not
Oh,
realizing there may come a
that's
day
really
I don't have any, you know?
yeah.
And not seeing God move in that sort of way. God might want to do something different. So I just wish I would have slowed down. I wish I would have allowed myself to be discipled more, um, poured in more. I just always thought I was right a lot of the times. And then I was scared of people speaking into me because I was scared of them making me miss God. So that's just a lot of the things I feel like I wish I could have done a little different.
Yeah, gosh, I mean, there's a lot of important principles in that. I mean, I kind of like that idea. A lot of people feel like, oh, okay, I need to get a bunch of training. I need to make sure I am a really good preacher before I start or something. And part of me kind of likes your approach. I mean, I definitely feel like there's not as much power in regurgitating somebody else's
Mm-hmm.
information, but there's definitely something to be said about just going out and doing it because
Yeah.
you learn way more like trying and failing than you do kind of like reading the textbook and be like, okay, once I have the textbook perfect, then I'll go out and try it. I kind of feel like if you if you just get out there and yeah, maybe it's not going to be your
Yeah.
best attempt. That is such a classroom for young people. Uh,
Yes.
so I like that approach.
I want to see if I could find, so I don't want to butcher this verse. Let me see. I think it's in Luke. I gotta find it. I think Jesus talks about. I think he says in my former book. I'm just gonna say it is written. So don't. Let me give you a paraphrase here. But he talks about that Jesus began to do all the things he had, or teach all the things he had done. And I think it's harder to teach the theory of going into schools than it is to show you what I've done by taking you with me.
Yeah.
And this is the disconnect I feel like that happens at arenas and events is you hear these miraculous stories, and they are. Like, there are so much, Andy Bird says this, in the midst of a wild God moment are 1,000 boring days. And I don't know how to teach people the boring day parts because I can sit here and make
Wow.
myself seem real cool. Look, we did this and this. But the reality is, too, man, in the midst of that is pain, betrayals, hardships. I was broke. I remember one time I got out of a high school, I had $5 in my pocket. I was starving and my gas tank was on empty. Like, that is realities that come with this. The
Right.
problem is, because how old are you, John?
39.
So we're same generation. We were prior to, so I was telling my daughters yesterday, we are listening to 90s music. And I was like, oh, the 90s were the best. I sound like an old man. She goes, why, Dad? She's 9. I said, man, you know that back then parents didn't have phones? So all of our attention was on you guys? She goes, really? I go, man, we'd go to a party and nobody knew what was going on anywhere else but that party. And I
It's true.
realized that like social media has destroyed our ability to remain because we're just always looking at everything else God is doing. And it's a natural thing in the human heart that we're just comparing. It's
Mm,
why I think guys have a hard time like sitting in that because it doesn't look cool. Everybody
yeah.
wants the arena filled with, with stuff and the reels going viral. But that stuff is such a facade,
Yeah. There's a lot of
because it never speaks of the reality of all the crap we go through.
quick word to pastors and church leaders. If your heart is to see people activated in their missional calling, we would love for you to be part of our next Activated Church gathering. This is a space for pastors who want to learn from other pastors and leaders how they are effectively activating their people to mission. We know that this will be a time that'll strengthen you and inspire you. And if that resonates, fill out the interest form below. We would love to connect and explore what partnership could look like. Right. Yeah, there's a lot of boring hard work in between those big moments. That's too real. Uh, tell me a little bit more because this was also I think an important thing you mentioned about mentors. Like how did you find the right mentors? I don't know if you've ever had one where you're like, man, that actually he was not a good person to speak in my life. How can a young person find a good mentor? How do they know if they've found a good mentor? And why is it so important?
I always look for people that are excelling in areas I want to excel. I also, man, so I'll say this. I had a really, and I still do, an amazing spiritual father, Nets Gomez in LA. And everybody else to me after him would be a mentor. But he is a father. And the difference is he has the ability to correct me and discipline me and tell me. He's literally told me at times, man, you're really selfish. Man, you need to read your Bible more. I mean, and it's so much love. Like, and I think the problem is in today's culture is people are so sensitive that they don't allow themselves to be fun. Everyone wants a mentor or a life coach, uh, but that's very different than a father. And I know sometimes it's gotten weird with father, the fathering shepherding movement. And I'm not saying people are getting controlling with you and dictating your every move, but at the same time, like a father doesn't have competition. Pastor Ness has never once, I've never felt used to connect him to somebody, to you to like nothing. In fact, most of the time I'd go into a meeting and I'm just offshooting all my accomplishments because I want to feel affirmed.
Oh
And it's the
yeah.
last thing he cares about. You know, he's like, "Oh, that's great, hijo. Like, how are you doing?" I'm like, "I'm good. We've done this and this." He's like, "That's great. Like, how are you doing? How are your kids? How are?" And I just feel like if you find someone like that, you got to get over the tension moments. Because I remember I told him, I said, "Look, I know me. I said, in the moment you tell me something I don't like, I'm going to want to leave." So I said, "I want to make a deal with you." This is when I first met him. I said, "I promise that I'll only leave through your front door with a blessing on my back."
Whoa.
And there were many times he was correcting me, and I was like, "I'm out of here. I don't need to take this. I'm 25 years old. Who does he think he's talking to?" But man, I would sit there, and when I let myself cool down, I was like, he's right. He's right. And that's where I don't want to get into this too deep because it's a Pandora's box, but that's where you have a culture today where everything is hurtful and everything hurts my and I don't know, I don't see in the scripture where I heard this guy say this too, like forgiveness is extended if you've been sinned against, not just if your feelings have been hurt. Because there are things he tells me that hurts my pride,
Yeah.
you know?
But it's needed.
I need it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I'm discipling an 18-year-old kid right now. His name is Isaac. And he was calling me every month for a few months. And I said, "Hey, man," I said, "I'm very busy, but I'm willing to pour into you." I said, don't want to be a father, but I just want to pour into you. So why don't you talk to your pastor, see what he thinks? And long story short, I mean, the kid has doubled his income. He's gotten out of debt. I helped him start two businesses. He has two sole proprietors. He's thriving. And
Wow.
ministry is this much of what we discuss. It's like, bro, we're going to get your life. I mean, there was a situation, he wouldn't mind me sharing this. He works for my stepdad, and he dropped a very expensive watch that he was taking content for. Very expensive. He sells high-end watches, my stepdad. And he calls me. He's like, "What do I do?" I said, "You man up. You go in there, you own it, and you pay whatever you damaged." He goes, "Okay." Like, people don't think that that's ministry, but could you imagine the kind of minister he will be because of those integrous pieces that was instilled? It wasn't about go preach and go like, that's cool. He's very gifted. He has 100,000 on Instagram and, big following and subscribers on YouTube, but that's never what we talk about. And I think that's what's changed over the last decade for me. I used to disciple people more into like, come on, man, we got to win souls. And that's great. But then they're in debt. They can't pay their bills.
Yeah.
Like they don't have a license. And I feel like it's a disservice for us as leaders to do that anymore. They're great assets to our ministry, but in 10 years, they've progressed this much in their life,
Yeah.
you know?
Well, I mean, the gospel has to be good news for your whole life. It has to, Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. the abundant life. And so I think having just that narrow view of impact, is neglecting the impact that a healthy life and family and kids and being able to provide, for them. That's all part of it. That's part of the Christian life. So
It's
yeah,
it's true. Yesterday was his graduation from high school, and so his dad was deported when he was 9 for beating his mom. Hasn't had a
whoa,
dad since. His mom couldn't afford to come. She's in Orlando, and I went to that graduation. I literally wanted to tear up because I remember when he first came here. He was contemplating, "Why I don't even need high school." I'm like, "You're going to school." And I hire him for. I have a company, so I hired him for my company to do work too. And I remember, yesterday we were just watching him walk, and we were like, "Yeah," and he didn't have any family there. And I literally thought to myself, he will never forget. He'll forget my sermons. He'll forget my prayer times. He'll never forget that guy sat in my graduation. And then I told him when he graduated, he goes, "Well, what do I do next?" I go, "You're going to college." I helped him enroll in faith because he's gonna be able to get a Pell Grant. He goes, "Why do I have to go to college?" I said, "Because you don't have a dad that's pushing you to go to college." So I said, "In 2 years, when you got a bachelor's, you'll thank me." But I think if we would focus on those things with young people, you wouldn't have that generation that's bitter and angry because they're like, I might not have, let's say I don't like John Mark. He was hard on me, but you know what? He made me start a business and I'm
yeah.
wealthy now. I didn't like the things he said when I was 18, but I have a degree and I love God. Yeah.
Gosh, I mean, this is so powerful because we've been speaking to. I guess I've been thinking from the perspective of young people, but you're. I think you just open the conversation up to now. Let's like these moms, these dads, these people that are a bit older that have some of these high school people in their life. How important that role of champion, mentor, somebody that actually shows up, to be the person that is at the high school graduation, how deeply that impacts somebody. And that's exactly what, this generation is like screaming for. They're saying, please come do life with me. They have access to, they can scroll, hear the best sermons, it's all at their fingertips. Ask any Bible question to ChatGPT. But what they don't have is those mentors that actually like will walk with them through life.
Yeah.
Um,
When I met Isaac, he was sleeping on a couch on someone's house, going to high school, catching the bus. So I said, "Hey, I have a rental property." He says, "Why don't you rent a room?" I said, "I'm not going to give it to you for free. I'll charge you a little bit of rent." I said, "And then I'll employ you. I have a business, so I'll employ you. You work for me. If you've noticed my social media content recently is good, he's doing it, not me. So he's been helping me with that." So I employed him and I gave him a place to stay. And I remember when one day, so when he moved in, I took him to Walmart. I drove him there. He got his sheets and his towels. He had never bought anything his whole life like that. So a couple days later, he sends me this video kind of contradicting what I'm mentoring him in. It was like a motivation. It was motivational guys, go, going crazy.
yeah.
And I go, "Oh, he goes, "What do you think?" And I said, "That's awesome." I said, "Do you know that guy?" He goes, "No." I said, "Do you think you'll ever know him?" He goes, "Probably not." I said, "Is he going to take you to Target, buy towels, buy soap, help you pick out, your furniture or whatever?" He goes, "No." I said, "Okay." I said, "So why let a guy pour into you and shape your ideologies that you'll never have a relationship with?" But that is what we have today is people think they're getting pastored online, and it's impossible because that person doesn't know you. And for me, Isaac is a lifesaver for me because I realize if I don't disciple somebody, there is so much I miss of God. So I think it's a lot of times like we think we're doing a favor for that kid. No, that kid is doing a favor for me too. It has taught me. He's pure Gen Z, man, 18 years old. Like, you know, he was playing Minecraft and making YouTube videos at 9. I was like, dude, I was picking my nose at 9. Like, was it playing Minecraft, uploading YouTube videos? It's a different generation. And I think the importance of parents and elders, man, I can't emphasize that enough. Like,
Yeah. Well, what would
yeah,
you say to somebody that maybe feels a little bit insecure to be in that mentor role? Like, I don't know if I have anything to offer them. I don't know what to say. I don't know what they're going through. I feel disconnected from that generation. Like they think I'm uncool. Yeah. What advice can you give somebody like that?
you know, Jesus is from the line of David, right? We all know that his genealogy. You look at Mary's genealogy. But what people don't realize is he's also from the line of David through Joseph, his stepdad. So you have a man that has no DNA of himself in Jesus. Yet because he chose to father him, grafted him into his lineage. And that to me should help a lot of people that feel insecure to think, I may be the only godly lineage that this kid will ever have.
Whoa.
Like, I can choose to father them. And remember, fathering doesn't mean control. I get Isaac on I'll connect you and you can do a follow up with me not on it. And you ask him, does Brian control you? I lead him through choices.
Yeah.
One day he's like, just tell me and I'll obey. Tell me and I'll obey. I says, I will not do that. I says, I will not, you should not obey me to obey me. You should obey because it's what you desire. Because in the moment I'm not there with you, or you'll find ways around me. You want to, Isaac, I said, don't do what I did that. Obey to obey, or obey because I want to preach, or obey because I want to be promoted. I said, bro, obey because you love God. And it's what, so every time he's like, what do you think? I said, what do you want to do? If he's going off the rails, I'll give him some advice. Hey man, that's really dumb. And I've told him that that's
Yeah.
not a good decision. But there's been times he's like, hey, I want to buy this. What do you think? I said, I don't think it's wise. You don't have that much money. Do what you want. And he'll buy it. And then he's like, bro, I'm coming up short, man. Can I work for you a little more? I said, sure. Like that's part of that, you know? And so I think somebody that feels that insecurity, just know you might be the only way that kid's ever gonna have God in their life and in their legacy.
I like I think I heard Christy Brent say this. And she was just saying the need is too big to let your insecurity keep you on the sideline. And when we look at these high school students, this age group, there's in some ways they're crushing it, in some ways they're fighting for their life, you know. And I think these adults feeling like, okay, I don't know if I have any way to connect. I think you just have to realize, gosh, okay, the need right in front of me is so big that I got to show up. Everybody loves food. I'll just take them out for food and then just ask them about their life. Like I can't just like feel insecure and not do anything.
Yeah, well, if the premise of relevancy is followers, then they've bitten the wrong fruit. Like that's what I think a lot of adults struggle with. Or no kid, like I don't change my children's life because I'm relevant to them. Like I change
Yes.
their life because I know more than them. I tell my daughter's 9 and she thinks she knows everything. And I literally will sit her down and say, I want you to know something. I know way more than you know. I said, I am
Yeah.
the smartest man in your life. And I said, and me and you are very similar. So there's nothing you can get over me that I haven't probably already done. But I instill that into them so they don't get this mindset of like, well, you're old. Like, I want her to value old people and to value like you've been through so much life. And I do think Gen Z has their issues, but no worse than we did, you know? And deep down inside, what I desired more than anything was a father. But a father was, again, somebody that would take responsibility for me in my wins and my losses. I feel like when what I love about Isaac is my motivation with him is not to further my ministry. Therefore, he's not an asset. Therefore, if he's not an asset, he can't be a liability. He's just someone I'm pouring into. And I told him, you might be with me for 2, 3 years, maybe. There isn't this mindset like you're going to be here with me for 20 years. Like
Right.
I have
Yeah.
him right now, and he might move on or eventually outgrow me, and that's okay.
Yeah. I like that. Well, what would you say to these young high school guys that do feel like God's calling them to do something, to take action, like this 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 season of preparation, I guess. Like, what things should they be focusing on? Like, is it more important that they work on their preaching, or is there something deeper that they should be focused on?
If they're in missions, I didn't do this my first years. I have an unspoken requirement now. Get financially established. I know it sounds stupid, but start a trade, learn a business, do missions. And no one's saying don't do missions and go preach. This would be a foundation piece. Make sure that there is someone speaking into that part of your life, because I feel like that that's the core of a lot of people's issues is the basics. Clean your room, make your bed. Like if you owe people money, pay them back. I'm big with my guys here. Like, hey, like one of the first thing I do when I sit with somebody, they're like, "Can you help me?" I said, "Well, what debts do you have? Do you owe anybody? Okay, let's get them paid." Why? Because it liberates their mind. They don't have this burden they're bogged down with. And they learn to live, because who is clapping for that? Nobody.
Huh, interesting.
But it
Where did
teaches
this
them.
thing come from? I'm so surprised at your answer about the finances being the first thing you mentioned. But then, I'm thinking about your grandma sending you food. Is that like, was that the story arc? Or like, how did God emphasize this? And I totally agree with you, because I think of a lot of my young YWAM friends that are just getting crushed with, the financial burden. And I don't know if there is enough emphasis on it if you
I
really
think
want to be in
it
ministry.
comes it comes to me from seeing how bitterness creeps in, and how money, right? It, the love of money is the root of all evil, yes. And sometimes we forget that the spirit of mammon, we don't talk enough about this, but when you think about money, money is a god when it tells you what you can't do and you can do. And I feel like now I'm not teaching everybody to get rich, but at the same time, there is a desire in my heart for, as missionaries, was sick of feeling like a burden.
Yeah,
I want to give. I want to bless. But I think we were never taught in our era how to be multifaceted, how to honor God and our missional community and our ministry, and how to make money. And so for me, the biggest thing I'm watching this kid, like what it's like for him to kind of come out of struggling financially. He's not where he wants to be, but to have the money to go get a hamburger, it frees up that space. Or he's not preaching out of a motivation to get money for honorariums. He is self-established. For me, I don't have to preach ever again. And I've been able to be self-established through a media company that I run. And, now that media company is able to give to the Jesus clubs. Like it's a different mindset where before I was always on the recipient end, and all of my relationships were motivated by, ooh, this could be a partner.
whoa,
Now I don't really need anything from you. Like, and for me, what it develops worth in what you bring and what you get.
interesting.
And so I think to me, like the longevity, like Isaac, he is joining Jesus clubs, but the first thing I did, he was going to go work for Chipotle. I said, please don't do that. You're going to make $800 a month slaving away. I said, I'll make you a deal. If you will start a media company I'll walk you. I drove him to the county clerk. We filled out his documents for a sole proprietor, and you're going to start a lawn business. I'll hire you for my lawn because I have 2 acres, and I'll hire you for my media company, and I'll get you a job with my stepdad. He doubled his income in 1 month, but it
That's
took him being willing to say, I'm going to do this. I'm
yeah.
going to trust this. And so I think that if we would start discipling young guys like that, it takes their focus off the pulpit. It puts it on themselves to say, how do I grow? Then everything, because we always talk about preaching should be an overflow, but none of our systems are set it up to be an overflow. Preaching is the main thing. That's why most guys, that's their main goal in the DTS world. How do I get on that stage? You know, not
Yeah.
everybody, but these young guys coming in, I know in the back of their minds, because that was me. How do I get on that stage? Ooh, how do I become the main speaker on the main night? You know, it's like,
Yeah.
that is so trash. Like, and then in the back, you know, I'm in debt, or, you know, I didn't pay this person or whatever it is. And I've been there too.
Interesting. Okay, you talked about bitterness just for a second, and that the whole idea of have you counted the cost? I don't know. Did you go through a season where you were kind of wrestling with the cost of saying yes to the Jesus Club thing, and how did you overcome that temptation to be bitter at what it was gonna require to see that dream of God built?
Yes. I mean, I think I have fought bitterness many times in my life. I have fought that. I think some of it was a lot of it was self-inflicted. So I do think that, and I don't want to get into a can of worms, but I do think people need to own stuff.
Yeah.
I think it's very easy today to blame leaders and to blame movements and to blame churches. But in the end of the day, we signed up for it. So if I sign up for a DTS and then 6 months later I'm broke and I was working out, you know, at the Go Center. Well, I signed up for that. I'm
Yeah.
not going to be bitter with it. You got to own that. Number two, I think that you have, like, I have walked through things too where people didn't know how to teach me those things in ministry. So I don't even blame my leaders in the past. They didn't know. Let me teach Brian how to start a business. They were doing the best they knew how. But to me, I'm realizing that things have changed. You know what I mean? Like the ability for someone to make money. I do teach, it's not about just make a bunch of money. There is an understanding that I make money to do missions. I make money to fulfill the call of God in my life, not I'm just making money to make money. Like that's great. But so there's a purpose to that. And then everything we do in missions, we're not expecting compensation. That's the other
Yeah.
thing that you have now where people are like, well, I heard the most gnarliest. I feel like there's an attack on servanthood where everyone wants compensation for something. I literally heard someone say, like, you know, you're trafficked if you're working for a ministry over a certain
Oh,
amount of hours. I'm like, what? You're serving the body of Christ. The problem is when we don't have other ventures and we depend on that, that's where it
yeah.
gets difficult. But I know that this is still relatively not new, but I do believe that this is relatively something that is coming into being now where we're able to teach younger people this.
Yeah. That's interesting. I think a lot of people are gonna to resonate with that and feel that. Um, okay, I just want to go back to the high school thing uh, before before we end because I'm really curious when you ran these Jesus clubs week to week, are you setting up a program or how are you giving space for the Holy Spirit to move? Like, is it just a formula? Like you run the play, you do the sermon and God moves? Or is there some space of like, no, we really are leaning on the leadership of the Holy Spirit, giving him space to actually mark people? What's your philosophy or what have you learned from your experience in that? And essentially coach these young people that are like, okay, I'm starting a Jesus club. What would you tell them about, the actual 30 minutes they're gonna have with their students?
Oh man, I'd bow my head every week and ask the Lord to speak a message. The formula is more of like, hey, here's how you get in, get a gym, Make sure you have a decent sound system. If you can't, then talk real loud. Give out pizza at the end. That's not what touches hearts. It is the messages. And I would encourage younger people to actually study. Don't wing it. Know what it is you're communicating and cut out all the fluff. Also, the introduction of a message is the most powerful piece. So you don't want to sit there. I never get up there, hey, my name is Brian Barcelona. No one cares about me. I get up there and I'll say, hey, I was at the store the other day and I was watching this guy and he was standing in the line, and I'm immediately open up with a story.
Yeah.
And to me, I've had this theory, it's story, truth, application. So I always tell a story. I'll always preach the Bible, and there will always be a way you apply that word to your life immediately. So, I mean, there's been altar calls in schools where I remember on Father's Day, I preached on fathers, and I just said, if you don't have a dad that you've talked with in a while and you're able to send them a message, I can't tell you how many kids came up to me the next week saying, guys, or Brian, I reached out to my dad for the first time and we're having lunch now next week.
No way.
So yes,
Yeesh, powerful.
I mean, that's, like, I got to tell this story. I got a FaceTime yesterday from a guy, Cameron Smith.
Yeah.
So when is this live or is it going to be played later?
Later.
Okay. Well, hope this doesn't spoil it, but he's going to do something really big in his life right now. It's a big step in his life. And I met Cameron when Cameron was in high school. He was being abused by his mom. He had no dad and he didn't know God. And he came in for one piece of pizza and never left. And I remember when his principal came up to me when he was graduating, he says, hey, I know this guy's life. Can you do anything to get him out of his house? So we invited him to live with us. You could ask him this story. I was one of the first people. I took him to a grocery store. And because he showed up with like 20 boxes of mac and cheese. And I'm like, bro, you got to eat something else. We went to a grocery store. He bought veggies. He bought milk. And that was his journey to now seeing him go through YWAM. I'm sure he's had ups and downs like all of us. But I'll never forget when he called me when he was in Hawaii and he says, hey, B, I made it, man. I made it out the hood.
No way.
That's the stuff that I think it's messy. It's frustrating. There was a lot of phone calls and meetings in between there, and he was mad, and that all comes with it. But when you talk about how do you go into a high school, it's all the same principle. Big moments have a lot of sucky ones.
Yeah.
That's the reality. That's life. It's not spiritual warfare. It's not oppression. It's life. Life sucks sometimes.
Yeah.
But on the other side of it, it's a whole lot better than if you quit.
That, Brian, the stories, the insights, I mean, that was brilliant. If somebody wants to start a Jesus Club, we can add all the links and things, but just tell them a little bit of the process. How often are these Zoom calls happening? How long is the training?
Yep. They happen every week. All you got to do is go to your app store, download the Jesus Club app, sign up on the training, and our team will jump on there every week and they train.
And I guess maybe end with a little bit of like, why do we need them to take action? If they're wrestling, like, I don't know if I'm the guy, I don't know if I have what it takes. What would you say to somebody that's wrestling with, I kind of feel like I'm supposed to do something, but I don't know if I can really pull it off.
Yeah, I'll take this from Bill Johnson. He said, if you've had an encounter, you owe one. And I just think if you've had an encounter, the least you can do is just give it a shot. I mean, what's the worst that's going to happen? I always tell people, they're like, well, I'm afraid to be rejected. I'm like, well, you don't got to be afraid of it. It's promised. It's going to happen. Like,
that's good.
At least be rejected for like something for the Lord. You're going to be rejected at, whatever. Maybe you ask a girl out or, I don't know, you're going to the coffee shop, whatever it is. Like, your rejection's inevitable. At least let it have purpose. And so I just think there's more to lose by someone not going than there is if they go.
Yeah, the transformation that will happen to their character, they'll become more brave. They'll learn, if you can learn from that failure, I mean, it will shape who you become.
Yeah, I
That's
agree.
powerful. Well, bro, that was so good. Thank you.
Yeah.
Needed that.
Thank
That
you
was
so much for
inspiring.
having me.